think about is as we go through life early on, a lot of times, especially when we're in sports, we face adversity, and that starts getting us practiced up, I think, for things. And you find that when we get in our comfort zone, I mean, it's an old saying, comfort brings misery.
Yeah.
And I feel like if you don't keep doing things outside your comfort zone to challenge yourself, then you aren't malleable anymore.
Yeah.
And my wife the other day, I said, man, it would be neat to, I mentioned something to do, and it was going to be a pretty big challenge. She says, why would you do that? What do you have to prove? I said, it's not to prove anything. It's to keep yourself pliable.
Yeah.
And to challenge yourself so that you can be better. Because if you're not challenged and you're, quote unquote, set in your ways and you're not used to any adversity, man, when a least little thing comes about, it's really bad. It's really bad. And in horses, we've talked a lot about when we've been training, we've mentioned stretching them. You know, like today, you were on that colt, and so what you were wanting is you were wanting him to hustle a little more in the back up. He needed to get stopped and pedal back a little quicker.
Yeah.
And sometimes you'll get some swishy-tailed and penny-eared when you go to doing that, especially if you've just trail rode him a lot, which is good. But you've never called upon him a lot. And we talk about calling upon them horses a lot. But if you call upon them too much, they're frazzled and they can't hold it together. Then they're just tight all the time.
Yeah. Which I'm the other extreme. I'm the other extreme.
So with that being said, so you coach for how many years?
Well, I got paid to coach for 27.
And you're still coaching now?
Yeah, which technically I'm getting paid to do it now.
Right.
But it's more on the lesson side.
Yes. And you coached, for anybody wondering, it's varsity basketball, girls basketball.
And some junior high and then cross country.
Yes. So there's quite a plethora of individuals you've worked with over the years there and different personalities and everything. And so I know you and I have talked before about what makes a good player, what makes a good competitor, someone that's desirable to coach, someone that's successful, and then, of course, how that plays out for the rest of life and everything you do. So what are some of the traits and stuff that you quickly observe when you go over the years when you would have different groups come in, and kind of how did it start and what did you learn? How did it change from when you first started coaching? Of course, there's a learning curve for you also along with the players. How did it change, and what are some things that you looked at different or that you changed the way you gauge something?
When I first started, I was going to make them do it. You know, kind of a Bobby Knight style, like I'm forcing it on them. And, you know, somehow they didn't all quit on me, you know. But, I mean, I was pretty hard on them. I mean, I didn't really look at building relationships with them. I mean, I feel like I probably had a little bit of that in me anyway, but I wasn't trying. And actually, I was trying to really make sure there was a separation between me and the kids because I was close to their age at that time. So I was like,
yeah, you were fresh out of college. Right?
I was, and I didn't want, you know, them to think I was their friend. So I really tried hard not to allow any of that. And, I mean, one thing there is the older I got, the less I worried about that, and the more I could tell they looked at me more as a grandpa type than, you know, somebody, you know, 5 or 6 years, you know, from their age. But I don't know if there was ever like this defining moment where I was like, I switched over, but I think it was just like everything else with me anyway. It's a slow process of change. And, but I figured out that and this I know you will be able to run with on the horse side, if I can get them to do it for me, then it's a lot easier for me. If I can get them to buy in, I always said to get them to run through a wall for me, then I got them. And so with that, you got to develop a relationship. And, I feel like, too, as you get older, it's easier to develop that relationship because you're not worried about them, that especially guys coaching girls, that, them misconstruing anything there because you're so close in age. And you can still be hard on them, don't get me wrong, but I just didn't feel like as I went along I had to be as hard on them because they were bought in. Like, their goals were my goals. I mean, they were very similar. And now that sometimes you have some that don't. I mean, but for the most part, and that whole process, like I say, I don't know where it switched over, but it took 27 years for me to get there, from the beginning. So
yeah, and on some of the personality traits of the individuals, I mean, what are some of the better characteristics to have, other than the obvious, to have a player, easy to work with or to develop and mold? And what's some of them that's a little bit tougher?
Well, the ones that are tougher are the ones that want to quit easy. The quitters. And honestly, and I've told you this before, I mean, the ones that are the best are the ones, and I always said, that had just a little bit of turd in them. Yeah. I'm not too much, but if they're too nice, then they tend to want to quit, when things get tough. And I mean, I'm not going to name any names, but I could give you a pretty good list of those types. And some of them, even that had a little, maybe too much turd, if you could change them a little bit and get them to buy in for you, then you could make it work. But, coachability, but sometimes you got to earn that with them. I mean, they don't just walk in the first week and they're like, I'm in. I'm in with whatever you want to do. And it takes a lot of, them seeing that stuff's working. And that's why, there were games that, we might make a pretty big change with our team. And the example I could give you is, this was my last year coaching varsity. We played Blue Eye, who was a good program in the championship of their tournament. We started out the season in that tournament, so it was the third game of the season, and we made it to the championship and played them. And there were some things that we needed to do to be successful. We wasn't there yet, the third game of the season, and so I told my assistants, we're just going to play. It's too early to try. It wouldn't work anyway at this point. And they beat us by 30. And we played them at Christmas, the last game before Christmas break, which would have, probably been the 12th game of the season. And we played them at home. And we were up with just a few seconds left. And they hit a 3 from just past half court at the buzzer to beat us. And I wanted that so bad because I knew that that would solidify that buy-in, or at least be a step, because we had made those changes. We'd been working on those changes, and a team that had beat us by 30, now we're in it. But it still did. Just because we didn't win the game, it still did. Because at the banquet at the end of the year, I asked all of them in front of everybody, and I said, what was our turning point in our season? And they all said it at the same time, that game, and
that was the struggle.
I
mean, you guys had that major bad thing happen.
Yeah.
Lost by 30.
Yeah.
And then you come back, and that that stretched
and lost
you guys.
by one.
Yeah, and then lost by one and still won.
Yeah,
I mean, you lost by one, but it's a win. It was a win. It's kind of like when we go to the the horse show and we don't end up winning first, but man, that colt for the first time out, it done everything really good. Maybe it marked zeros on every maneuver or something along that nature, but man, it's really good to see that horse do good, and it's a win to us. And even going to a roping.
Yep.
You know, you go to the roping, you don't break out.
Yeah.
You rope every steer, and you just was out of the money a little bit. But it's still a win. Because if you do that consistently, you're going to succeed.
Yeah.
I mean, literally win.
Yeah.
More than often.
And two, you know, I can give you and this was a team that a really good team that I had that is kind of the same deal. You know, the year before, if we had a lead, we just spread the floor and held onto the ball. We shot free throws good. We just, if there's 3 minutes left, we'd spread the floor. We graduated 2 players from that team. And I don't know what it is about Christmas break, but it seems to be that's close to the time when we start kind of, maybe making some changes. And we played a team that was really good in our conference, and we're up 13 with 4 minutes to go at their place. And so we did it. We were 2 players removed from that same team. We spread the floor, blew the lead. I walked in after the game, and I said, "We're never doing that again." I said, "If we got somebody down, we're burying them." And from that game, we won 14 in a row and made it to the district championship. And that one, I don't know if that was necessarily on them or on me, but the change that I had to make is that even though we only were minus 2 players, that wasn't the same team as the team that that we had then, and that group was bought in. They were bought in from the beginning, But to fast forward to the end of the season, we're playing that team to win the conference championship undefeated, and we're standing in the door getting ready to run out and warm up, and I was fidgety. They could tell, the kids could tell I was kind of worked up, and they asked me about it. And I said, "Yeah, I'm a little nervous." And they go, "We got it."
Yeah.
And we ended up beating them by 20.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's just.
Well, so back to that stall game.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this before.
I know.
We've talked about this. And so I think what I notice a lot in different things in life, whether it's horse training. So in horse training, a stall game might be, I had to go to Buckskin World one time, and my wife had a mare she was showing, and she had placed pretty good in a few classes. She says, "Hey," and this is not a reining horse, okay? She said, "If you'll get in the reining, and if we can just get some points, it'll help go towards the all-around." And I told her, I said, "Hey, look, this horse don't even have a flying lead change on it." And she says, but could you just get through the pattern and maybe get a few points? I'm like, "Well, I guess I could take the penalty on the lead change, and just do a simple and maybe hang in there somehow."
Yeah.
But that run was probably one of the more hard runs that I've ever had to do. And I had to do it one-handed, of course.
Yeah.
And I had to go in there and not break pattern.
Yeah.
And just get a score. That's what I had to do. And to me, that's a lot harder. I think it's harder. We've talked about it in different areas for a champion to stay champion and repeat because everybody's gunning for him.
Yep.
And it becomes back in that offensive defensive mode. Are you defending it? And the incumbent's coming in to take it. He has to be offensive.
Yeah.
And I think in horse training sometimes a lot of people get to showing They've had a little success. Now they just go out. Their horse is maybe getting a little smart in the show pen or in the roping pen, and that horse getting a little worse in the box. And they just keep going just to try to get by. Just get by. Let's get by. And the more you do that, normally the worse it gets and harder it is to hold on to. And it's kind of like the snowball on the side of the hill.
Yeah.
It's either rolling up or rolling down. But it's really hard and taxing to sit there and hold it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the same way with personal growth in life. We either have to keep putting difficult things in front of ourselves, even though they might seem a little senseless to some people, but they're for what's between our ears, not necessarily some trophy at the end of it.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. And I know you're not a big proponent of stalling, but I know it's crazy. If you studied a lot of the older, like the 60s and 70s, like it was crazy how ball control was such a big part of the game. And I know I'm not that far before you, but even in the 80s, like we would do that. We would hold onto the ball. But we were a running team, but at the end of the game, it seemed like a long time, and just dribble around until they fouled you and shoot free throws. I mean, there was a lot of games as a point guard where I might have only had 4 points, and at the end of the game, because of the stall game, I might end up with 14 just off of free throws. But, I also get where, not being aggressive, where that can hurt me too in areas with my horses. It's not always a good thing.
No, it's definitely a balance. No different than we're trying to get the horse to ride balance physically. We need them to ride balanced mentally. And I think the horse is a lot like us too. We have to do difficult things on them every once in a while just so that we know that when called upon, they'll at least attempt and not just check out.
Yep.
Because if you just don't ask for anything, well, I mean, if you never ask for, a real fast rundown and you did it the first time at a show, well, it's kind of like opening a present from your grandma. You don't know what you're going to get. You just hope it's not socks. And, and that horse sometimes now it's going to relate the show with that mental fatigue it experienced, and it's a negative emotion. That horse is going to relate to that, and then now you're going to have to school, and you might, depending upon the horse, because we always talk about how smart they are. We've had some horses back when we roped a lot. We might run steers for almost 2 weeks before we score one because the horse still would not even flinch when you open the gate. But then we've had the better horses we've had. It's about 3. Normally about 3 steers. And that's from the beginning, in the very beginning. About the 3rd steer, they're telling you, hey, I'm catching on to this, which is good, but we have to keep that
manage it.
Yes, we do. We have to manage it.
Yeah, and I struggle with this stretching them thing. I mean, I'm learning slowly, but I've seen the importance of it.
Mental stretch.
Yes.
Yeah. And that balance of you cannot just wail on them all the time and call upon them all the time, but you do have to every once in a while call upon them, or else they become the kid who's, grew up playing upward basketball, which is just a local deal that it's more of a
entry level
deal. Just everybody go have fun, and I mean, the refs will even kind of explain to them what they've done wrong every time. So it's very entry level versus you go to public school. And that kid's he's devastated. He's like, oh my gosh. He said, this is nothing like that. And so there's definitely a balance. Okay. In the coaching, I mean, you've coached the girls basketball for years, and I think coaching's coaching. So, and I coach a lot of amateurs. And and I know yours are there for a different reason. Mine are there because it's a hobby.
Yeah.
It's a hobby. People are into the horses on my deal for a hobby. And I know basketball can be a hobby too, but it's a little different with kids, I think, even though it is voluntary, unless the parents are making them go.
Which there is some of that.
Which you do have some of that. So the getting them to buy in, the difference, I guess, would be when someone comes to me with a horse, maybe they want to own a horse to show, or maybe they just want one to be a forever horse or whatever it might be. I think one of the hardest things is help coaching them and consulting with them on a little bit. Okay, they can set the goal on what they want. What do they want to be? What do they want to do with this horse?
Yeah.
And then I have to work backwards. And that's difficult. And I believe it's difficult because, like, say in the basketball game, for instance, I heard you talking today, it's all about fundamentals. And say a kid comes up and says, hey, I want to play collegiate basketball someday. What do I need to do different now that my chances will increase of me doing that? And I noticed you had one of your students you were talking about has been with you for a while now, and he'd worked on his shot a lot, and he was pretty much from scratch. And he shows up, and you noticed him shooting different. Yeah. And you knew right away what had happened. You didn't know who, but he was imitating somebody. So the good thing is that person is reached out. They're trying to get good counsel. They're trying. So they're not prideful. They're trying to imitate someone higher than them or above them. But then you get to the catch-22 of, is it good counsel or bad counsel? Which, you can be as open-minded as you want, but if you don't pick the right places to go to get your counsel, it will be just as devastating, I believe, as seeking no counsel. Yeah. So a little bit about that there, and kids are always, and adults, we're always looking to imitate somebody. It happens a lot in the horse industry, I feel, because the only runs we see are on the Futurity or the NFR.
And it's a 20-second snippet.
It's a 20-second snippet. It's the best in the world doing it. And then people go out. They don't see the warm-up pen. They don't see riding in the pen at 1 o'clock in the morning. They don't see, in your case, that kid doesn't see someone that he should be idling. He doesn't see that person just shooting right in front of the basket, 6 foot in front of the basket. Right.
No, they don't see that at all.
They just see the 3 foot behind the 3-point line game winner. They see the 360 slam dunk. They see all that stuff. And so kids and adults and people as a whole try to imitate more of the finished product, or I don't want to call them the freak deals, but the deals that aren't the fundamental pieces.
Because fundamentals are boring.
They're boring. It's boring. I mean, good horse training, if someone was to come to the barn and watch, I'm sure they would say, man, is this all you do every day? Man, that looks boring. How do you go from that to getting this? And it's like your practices. I know you used to mention you would go, and you've seen Coach K's practices, or no?
I have not seen his, but I've seen or I've listened to him speak a couple of times. I listened to Bobby Knight 3 times. KU, when Roy Williams was there, which he was a fundamental guy, and Steve Alford, I would see him, and he was obviously fundamental because he played for Bobby Knight. So I got to see quite a few good ones, and hear a lot of the old school guys, speak and watch some of their practices. And their practices and fundamentals are what you're doing right here. It's no different.
Or you were doing and still are doing.
Yeah, it's no different. But, I really have seen Coach K, because Coach K sold I don't know how many disc set of his practices, but the fundamentals were organized really well to where you could go to whatever you wanted to see. And he was super fundamental, but there's another guy that was a player for Bobby Knight, and, just super fundamental. And, but it's just like, I mean, he's recruiting the best in the world, and they're working on pivoting.
They are.
and they're working on form shots, and they're working on angles of screens, and you know, like you said, kids watch the game and they don't see that they're working on all those little things. It's just like, you know, in my lessons, I mean, we work on form shots every time, you know, 3 feet away from the basket, and they go one at a time. I watch them, and I give them something, and it may look good. And I mean, that may be all I say, you know, one at a time all the way around. And then in the middle, I have them go get a drink, and when they come back, they're shooting threes and throwing up dumb shots. And it doesn't matter how many times you preach that to them until they kind of figure out that your time needs to be utilized better than just jacking around and just throwing up whatever.
Especially when a bigger portion of the pie is spent doing that.
Yep.
I mean, I you know, we've talked about kids needing just to go play and playground ball, and we've talked about people who just need to go ride. They just need to go ride their horse.
Yeah,
it's safe. You know, as long as their horse is safe, just go ride.
Yeah,
just ride the horse. Maybe they need it. Maybe their horse needs it. But just go ride. It doesn't have to be concentrated training. Where you run into problems is when there's so much of that and not the concentrated training or the specific shots and pivots and everything you're working on. And now you wonder why you can't execute in a game.
And wouldn't you say that maybe even if they go ride, little things like, I'm not going to just walk away from the barn and then turn around and lope my horse as fast as I can back to the barn, and little fundamentals things that you think, kind of like fundamentals in sports, things you assume they know that they don't know, and then the next thing you know, they got a really sour horse, you know, and
they said it just all of a sudden. With
Yeah.
horses, very rarely, I'm never going to say never, but very rarely is it all of a sudden. They tell you, you don't recognize. You know, it's a lot like that in people too.
Yep.
Normally, people won't surprise you all of a sudden.
Right.
Most of the time, if you pay attention, and you know, just
you saw it coming.
Yeah, you will see it coming a little bit. You might not have you might not have took note of it, but when you think back, you'll think, "Oh man, I seen that the whole time." You know.
Well, I mean, I do that with my horses.
Well, riding one into the roping box. People get to riding them in, and if you was to put your hand in the middle and squeeze with both legs, that horse starts shooting off the left or right, and riding into the show pen. If I go to riding into the show pen and that horse gets wiggly and wormy going in the gate, I'm quite certain that he's probably going to leak to that end, either on my spins, on my circles. He will find some way because his mind would rather be there.
Yeah.
But it wasn't all of a sudden in the show pen.
Right.
He told me right there.
Yeah.
And they will let you know.
And there are some differences. I mean, and maybe you can, because you're pretty good at this, you can tie it in. But, you know, you have individual, because we've talked about just kind of that individual. But then, you know, in sports, it's being able to get all those personalities to work together.
Yes.
You know, when you may have 2 or 3 strong personalities on the team together, and they all want to be the leader. And then I've had teams where nobody wanted to be the leader. Like there was a player that I'm like, they need to be the leader. But they didn't want any part of it, you know. I mean, those are probably the most frustrating parts of it. But when you have a team that has good leaders, it makes you look better. And when you have teams that may be super talented, but you don't have any leadership, it makes you look pretty dumb. Whereas you probably did about the same job with both groups.
Yeah.
You know,
well,
I know where you're going to go with this after that came out of my mouth.
It's exactly the same with horses. You take a dink and you're trying to basically make him the best dink you can. But it's like polishing a turd. You can polish it, and it's shiny, and it looks really nice and pretty. But if you get to looking at it a lot, you're like, man, that's a turd under all that glass.
Yeah.
It's just a turd. And not that you can't utilize that in some area.
Yeah.
Earlier at the barn, I was talking to the other trainer, and I said, there's a place for every horse. Yeah, it might be in the rodeo bucking stock, but rarely does that happen.
No.
I heard one time it said that back a long time ago, before they actually bred for bucking horses as much, I heard they would go through 200 sour saddle horses to find one that would keep bucking.
Really?
For 8 seconds.
It's too much effort.
It's too much effort. But in horses, it's a lot the same. You take a really good horse, and you're like, I'm a horse trainer. Got it. There's nothing to this horse training. But you don't stop and think, hey, that horse is a pretty good mover. Hey, that horse is built to where in the chest he can reach across and turn around pretty easy and efficiently, and he can do it fast. Hey, it's very forgiving. You can call upon it and liven it up, and it just comes right back down like you shut it off like a switch. Yeah. You could run that thing down and slide 20 foot and then get off and give it to your little kid, and they could cool it down. I'm a horse trainer. Yeah. And then you get another one that this horse is like nothing like that. And we need to be careful, because sometimes we let those slip through the crack because they take a little more attention. It's a little bit like you said a while ago. Some of the best players you've had a little bit of turd in them. Just a little bit. And I've heard psychologists talk about that in people. I heard a psychologist say something along the lines one time: if you have one that they're growing up and they never make a mistake and they're just a perfect little child, that's not as good as if you have one that kind of between I forgot what the age is. I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was like 9 and 15.
For me, it was probably 5 to 40.
Well, to where these kids would kind of, test the waters a little bit, be in a little bit of trouble. Yeah. But then they come back, and before they're 18, before they're out of school, they come back and they're back in reality again.
And I would see that out of kids all the time. Yeah. Not even players. Some that were I've had kids that I never did feel like I got them. I kind of failed them. We didn't, we wasn't successful with them. And then like 10 years later, you get an email from them and they're like, sorry, sorry for, how big of a pain in the butt I was, and this is what I'm doing now. And so you didn't make a success when you had them under your wing, but maybe enough things that you said helped them down the road.
Yes.
Which that's not reflected in wins and losses.
No.
Not at all.
And it's the same in horses. For instance, that horse that back in around, probably 05 or 04, a buddy of mine bought the Palomino horse at a sale. They walked this horse in. He's supposed to have 6 months reining training. Okay, they walked him in. My buddy purchased the horse, and I got him home, and I was going to ride him the next day.
Yeah.
And and he was there, my buddy was there, wanted to see how he was. The horse was gentle, super gentle acting. And my buddy's wife was pregnant, and I got ready to ride that horse, and I caught him, and she went into labor. He says, "Hey, we got to go to the hospital." So they head to the hospital. I saddled the horse up right at the hitching rail, and he just had his neck and head down, just act like he'd done it every day of his life. Got it. And I thought, you know what? No one's here. I just I've done this a while. Just to be safe, I'm going to take him in the pen. And we had a great big round pen there, deep sand. I said, I'm just going to get on him in there just to make sure there's nothing that I'm not seeing here. And so I took him in there, and I put my left foot in the stirrup. I didn't even cheek him around, because he's had all this training. And my right leg got level with his back, and this dude took off. And he took off running, and I tried to pull his head around. And if you tried to pull his head laterally, he would run sideways faster than forward. And that horse, he just ran around in there, and I'm just holding on. He wasn't bucking, just running off, scared to death. And I was like, what is going on, you know? And then he'd stop. I was like, man, I'll get off of him and look him over. Well, when he'd stop, if you moved, he'd just run off again. And that happened for a while. And I finally got my phone out of my pocket and called my wife. And I said, hey, you need to come over here. And I'm in this round pen. And I need you to get a hold of this horse so I can get off of him. Because every time he stops, I start to get off. I said, and you don't know which way he's going to go. And I don't want him to step on me or run over me. I said, he's not bucking. I said, he's not a bronc like that, but something's wrong. And she looks through the hole in the round pen. I go around, and she steps in. And I said, you just get a hold of the bridle, and when I step off, just send his hindquarters away from you. And she did. And there was nothing apparently wrong with the horse. But that horse, we ended up riding for a month on a lunge line, and me just lifting my hands up and down and rubbing on him because you couldn't raise a hand. And I think what had happened, I think he was a stud horse before we got him, and I think he'd been whipped on. Yeah. And I think people had got off of him and whipped him. So he wasn't going to let you off. And that horse, I ended up riding him for quite a while. Then we ended up roping steers on him. I got him to roping.
Was I around?
No, you were not.
Okay.
We called him Blue Duck.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. And this is one of the probably top 5 horses that taught me a lot. But, I mean, this horse, if you'd warm him up a little bit and you'd feel him kind of take that bit a little, and if you pulled on him, slow him down, he's just going to go faster. But if you just kind of went with it and just kept loping him until he had the edge off of him, then you were fine. You were fine. And then he was fine. And then, anyway, the last time he did it, I committed to him, and I just dropped my hand, and I just let him go. And we were in a big arena, and he never done it with me anymore after that day. But I let him just lope, and then when he wanted to slow down a little bit, I let him break down, and we cruised a little bit, and then I asked him for the lope. So I was bringing him back up on my terms. Yeah. And letting him know I wasn't going. He was expecting the fight. Yeah. He was expecting the fight. But that horse, I roped on him for quite some time, probably a year. And then after that, he ended up getting sold to some people out in Kansas. And that was in 2005 or 4, one or the other, right around there. And they still have him. They hosted me in a clinic last year, and I went out, and they still have him, and all the grandkids ride him. He's been a head and heel horse. He's been fine. He's been great. And so what I like about that, it's kind of like when your students call you back, you know, and say something you said and you'd forgot all about. Yep. That horse had enough of a foundation then that it was able to go on and not only be a good rope horse, but then after he got older, because he's pretty old now. I think he was 4 or 5 when we sold him. He was 3 when I got him. But that horse is still a good, just a good old soldier out there for those kids, and they do play days on him and everything. Wow. And he's really good. But that's the reward. And you talked about it's whether you win or lose. See, that's a win to me, because that horse was on his way to be a kill horse. That's where he was going, because someone would have got him and says, hey, this thing isn't safe. Because he wasn't. If you tried to one rein stop him and pull his head around, it wasn't going to happen. Yeah, because I think his head had been pulled around and he'd been whipped. So he associated that. Yeah. And he was taking care of himself. Yeah. And it was dangerous. I mean, he would run sideways and crash you into something and hurt your leg or knock panels over or crash into the wall. But that kind of horse right there taught me so much about trying to find out what the problem is and being there for the horse, and then letting it get in his mind enough and solid enough that I could send him on his way and he'd make it. Yeah. You know, I try to put him in some situations to where someone's not going to hold their hand all their life. I'm sure those kids just, kick and pull around on them, jump on them. Every kid, if you want to know if your horse will lope off without bucking, just let a kid ride it. Because they get on, a kid can only go about 2 steps and they have to run because that's fun. Yeah. That's why those little ponies are so bad.
Yeah. I mean, and don't you think another comparison is, like when you started horse training, you kind of use this terminology. You didn't have as many tools in your toolbox now.
I had no tools in.
And so you treat them all the same.
Yes.
Just like I always kidded because people say, that coach shows favoritism, and I'm like, you dang right I do. I'm going to show favoritism to the ones that try.
Yeah, you want to win.
Yeah, I want to win.
Yeah.
And that's what I would tell kids. First meeting of the year, I'd say, I just want to get this out of the way. I show favoritism. Uh-huh. If you've got a good attitude and you try, I'm going to like you. Uh-huh. But in the beginning, I have one way of looking at it. I didn't look at kids with different quirks. Mm-hmm. I'm just trying to coach them all the same. And then the thing is you only are an influence on one type of person. Mm-hmm. Because you have to appeal to different people's quirks. Mm-hmm. You just do. Yeah.
Well, it's the same with horses.
Yeah.
I mean, if you get one that wants to be real sensitive and looky, mm-hmm. what I normally do is the opposite of what most people would do. There's a lot of people, because I've had people come into the barn and they have a real watchy horse. I said, well, let's put him on the flag.
Yeah.
They're like, are you kidding? They said, he'll be scared to death of it. I said, you'll take that part, and in this case, it's the mind of the horse, mm-hmm. and you're going to give it a job. Mm-hmm. If you have a kid that likes to fight mm-hmm. all the time, you got two choices, the way I see it. You can either try to discipline him for it, and obviously he's got a temper, or you can put him in martial arts where he can gear that towards something constructive mm-hmm. and have control on it. And I look at that on those watchy horses, and you've got a few right now that's more watchy. Mm-hmm. And you can put them on a cow, or you can put them over an obstacle. You can do something.
Occupy their mind away from the thing that they're all worked up about.
For instance, if you have a horse, and this happens often, I get this call a lot. I have a horse, and he saddles a little cinchy. Mm-hmm. Well, aside from being, don't betray your horse in how you cinch him up. Don't just cut him in half. Mm-hmm. But say you're being good with that. And he's just, some of them, no matter what you do, they're just a little cinchy. Mm-hmm. Well, how about we go saddle him up in around anything else than a stinking, 4-inch deep sand arena where the footing's so great? Mm-hmm. Why don't we do it, like I said, out beside our barn, mm-hmm. we have a slight hill. Mm-hmm. Or we saddle him up and we have some railroad ties to trot him over mm-hmm. or something, to where he has a little bit more to think about other than just, taking off, jumping up in the air, kicking over his head and farting. Yeah. Something other than that.
Yeah.
And versus trying to say, hey, stop,
right.
and jerking on the lunge line or whatever you might be doing. Either that or you just turn him loose and let him do his thing, come back when he's ready.
Right.
Don't try to make, because you're not going to.
Right.
If a horse wants to buck bad enough, he's going to do it. Mm-hmm. You might deter it a little bit, and hopefully deter it a little bit if you're on their back, get their hind going around.
A good example of that is when we looked at a horse down in Arkansas. You went with me, and we put it was your idea. We put my son, Jordan, on the horse, and he had that thing. He was trotting the whole time, turning around this way, turn around that way, turn around this way, turn around that way. And if I had gotten on it, it would have probably bucked me off.
Yeah.
But Jordan was keeping it from bucking.
Yeah, he had enough feel, and he was like, this thing is running off, and I need to redirect it. And so instead of backing it up, which he knew would have made it worse, he just redirected it. Says, what about over here? What about over here?
Which he had been under your care, I guess we could say, for long enough that he knew what was.
He had felt that.
Yeah. But the funniest thing is we were standing there talking with the person that had the horse for sale, who kind of misrepresented it. And I bet he was on that horse for maybe 30 minutes. Pretty clse to it. And when we got back in the truck, you were like, I didn't think you were ever going to get off that thing.
He probably said, I didn't think I could either.
Probably.
He probably had that feeling that, I'd like for this thing to stop so I can get off, but I'm afraid to pull because it might go faster.
Yeah.
So he kept trying to
that
get
just
it
popped
redirected.
in my mind when you were saying that.
That's pretty funny.
So another thing that I thought of, and this is off the subject just a little bit, but it's a good comparison, is that, there's a lot of times that coaches are evaluated by a team just like, a really good team that I've had, and somebody will say, man, you did a really good job with that team. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking, and I guarantee you, I've told people, all I did was get out of their way. Uh-huh. I didn't do anything special. I tried to do less with more talent. And, when you feel like you did the best job was that team that went 13 and 14, you only had 6 kids that could play, and you used smoke and mirrors to get through it, and you coached your butt off, but nobody comes to you and says, man, you did a really good job with that team that went 13 and 14, except, and this is to me where the comparison is, your peers that know. Yeah. Those peers that know, they've been there and they know the job you did. Joe Schmo that's the, the banker or the real estate salesman and comes and watches a game every once in a while, he's not going to pick up on that. Mm-mm. But the people that know, and it's the same thing with training horses.
It is.
You get on some really good bred horse that it can do a lot of that stuff. It's just bred for it to be easy, and you don't have to do as much. But I've seen you for a long time not be able to get as many of those horses in the beginning, and you're trying to make them that kind of horse, and they're not bred to do it. And you did a heck of a job with them, but it still may not be easy for them. And I think that, the peers, the people that know, they recognize that, and the people that maybe don't appreciate it as much.
Yeah, and it's hard to do that because it's like taking someone who's not flexible and making them a gymnast,
yes,
or a kickboxer.
Yeah,
it's going to be pretty tough, but you can improve it, and you can maybe alter it a little bit, or find out, okay, if it can't spin real fast, it can, or stop real hard, can it back a little bit lighter?
Yeah.
Or if it can't spin real fast, well, maybe it's large, fast to small slows. Maybe it's extended trot good.
Yeah.
You try to find things to balance it all out versus just throwing them to the wolves. On the other hand, I feel like a lot of clients, they have to understand that depends upon which level they want to compete at. They have to be honest with themselves and try to start with the best possible scenario they can.
Yeah.
Because that'll be the biggest decision they ever make in the journey, is what you start with. What you start with right there. And that's very, very difficult for people to grasp. One thing is how pretty they are. And everybody wants to ride a pretty horse. Yeah. They do. And there's nothing wrong with that. I want to ride a pretty horse. Yeah. Everybody wants to ride a pretty horse. It's when that's number one on the list.
Yeah.
And that's number one on the list with a small budget.
Yeah.
And that's really bad. Because if it's number one on the list and you have a large budget, you can have that.
Yeah.
It's not a big deal. All it takes is money.
But don't you think that you don't, somebody comes to you that, they've heard good things about you. They come to you for advice, but they're still not 100% bought in. So they go ahead and they just go buy the one that they think.
Yes.
And then you try to make it work for them, and time goes by and it's not working, and the buy-in happens slowly. And so that horse that they should have bought in the beginning, then, they're more apt to maybe buy it at that point.
Yeah, they are, or sometimes they're so deep in right there, we just make the best of what we've got. Yeah. And that's fine. We have to learn it. And I believe this. It's okay to be ignorant.
Yep.
It's not okay to stay ignorant.
Right.
That's the problem. When we're ignorant on something and we don't understand, that's fine, because there's no way we can know everything. All of us can. But try to learn from that. And if you don't trust the person you're working with or asking advice or consulting with, then by all means, go get one that you do.
Yeah.
that you do trust. And I use the analogy all the time on airplanes. I mean, I can't imagine myself saying, you know what, I love airplanes now. I'm going to go buy a pretty airplane.
Yeah.
Off marketplace. And then, you know what, I don't know how to fly it, but I'm just going to, I'm just going to go and find someone who drives go-karts for a living and have him tell me how to fly the airplane.
Yeah.
And that's about how different it is sometimes in the different disciplines of horses.
Yeah.
It's that different. If you wanted to learn how to do, compete in the reining, but you don't know a reiner, but you do have a friend that raises halter horses. So you go to him.
Yeah.
And to a lot of people that's ignorant, now we take this for granted, but, well, a horse is a horse. Surely he knows something about horses. Well, he does, but it's way different.
Yeah.
A go-kart and an airplane are both a machine.
Right. Yeah.
And they have motors.
Right.
But one's very different.
Yeah.
And that's the tricky part right there. It is a lot of people, it's hard for people to understand that, horse is a little different because it's a live creature you're trying to learn about and learn how it works, learn how to pilot that creature.
Right.
And they're just like us. They aren't exactly the same every day. Some are more than others. And some, it's just like
new world.
It's just rinse and repeat every day, constantly. But that's when people go to, I encourage the working backwards. What's my goal? And they said, my goal is to go to small open shows. Okay. What's your budget? Okay. How often do you ride? That's a key. Some horses require a lot of riding to keep the fresh off. Some, they don't. You can ride them once every 2 weeks and they're pretty much the same. Some, if you don't ride them, if you give them the weekend off on Monday, you better be on your toes.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's what happens a lot. People go buy the wrong horse for their lifestyle and their goals. If you want to go win the world show, you might not be looking at the same horse as an open show, a local open show. Because you're going to say, what's it take? And work backwards. Go see what it takes to win that.
Yeah.
Here's what was there. Here's what they look like. Work backwards. I mean, it's as simple as that. And then find out, how am I going to get there?
Yeah.
And then listen to your whatever trainer you're with or whoever you're getting coaching lessons from or whatever. By all means, if you're going to ask, you don't have to do 100% what they say. But to me, if you're not going to do what they say, why don't you find someone? Because you're asking because you're wanting their opinion. They obviously, you think they have something to offer you. And so either that or you're just wanting affirmation.
Or the Jason Cook saying, or you're an asshole.
Asshole. Yeah. Yeah. You just like to ask, but you have no intention of doing anything about it. But so much of the time, I've had people send me horses and I said, what do you think about this one? I'm going to show at the little open shows and I ride once a month. And I look at that and says, no. Well, you haven't even seen the video. Well, I seen the papers and most of the time when I do see the video, I'll say, yes, it's still a hard no. And they'll say, well, why? It's because my eye's looking at something different than what they're seeing. They're seeing a horse run around the arena.
Yeah.
I'm seeing, is he looking out the gate? Is that rider selling it? That horse is 80% horse, 20% rider right there. That horse is running off, running off.
So this popped in my head, you talking about people setting goals. So we would set goals. We would set individual goals. And I usually, almost every year, each player would have a folder. And we would put our team goals in it. We would put their individual goals in it. And we would go over them. And if I just said, all right, I'm leaving the room, you guys set 5 team goals, and I'll be back. And I come back in, and the goals are win a state championship. And just unrealistic. And I'm sorry to say that, but I got to redirect them, because I mean, we need to set, and really it was more, I would have to kind of push them to the right goals, because what they were setting was stuff that they were going to be pretty disappointed. But I wanted it to be high enough, attainable, that they're going to have to work for, and I'm telling you, I bet 98% of them I had to do that. And I'm sure you're in the
same way.
Yeah.
And what you run into, I think, like someone who sets goals, but they're so unrealistic, because I've been around this before, those people end up down and in the dumps more because they fail every day. It's like if I put a list up every day, and that list has 25 things to get done, and every day I only get 8 of them. Well, in my mind, whether I like it or not, I didn't complete what I set out to do.
Yeah.
And so I think it's subconsciously, you're still a little bit of a failure.
Yeah.
And I think over time, it really eats at you. I mean, I think I've seen it cause depression before.
I can see that.
And I don't know that for sure, but I've just seen some people go the wrong direction. And it's great that they have the enthusiasm to set the goals.
Yeah.
But they're so unrealistic. And there's just no way it can be achieved.
And you have to guide them through that.
And I think you have to have little wins. And I think when you train a horse or teach an amateur, you have to have little wins. It's okay to want the big goal, but let's break it down where it's digestible.
Yeah.
It's like, I taught a clinic last Saturday, and it was a 6-hour clinic, and I have to be very careful to know my audience and to not give them more than they can chew.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter if you could imagine shoving a buffet in someone's mouth. How do you leave a buffet every time?
Full.
Miserable.
Yeah.
Yeah, miserable. You went in there, you were hungry, but what you done is you feel worse when you leave than when you went in there. Even though it's not a pleasant feeling to feel super hungry. But you feel terrible when you leave. And it's the same thing, I think, when you go to teaching people, you can feed them so much that they're more confused when they leave than when they came.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important as a teacher and a coach. Your end goal is to make someone better. And part of coaching is not only teaching them what to do with their horse or how to interact with their horse, but it's also how to take small bites to achieve their goals and how to set goals.
It is.
It's not just the X's and the O's, you know?
Yeah. And that's what I was going to say, as far as goals go. I mean, sometimes if I felt like, it was a group that could do it, if they said, win the conference championship, but that might be in there, but I didn't like putting winning stuff in the goals. I wanted it to be stuff that if we did it, we would probably have a chance to win a conference championship.
If your horse stops when you ask, when you say, "Whoa, we're pulling the rein," if it walk, trot, and lopes when you ask, not 5 seconds from now, if it will follow the reins, if the feet will follow the reins. And if all that will take place, I haven't even got into collection, or anything. If it'll do all the things right there, the forward, backwards, left, and right, and all your speeds and gears, you can go to a lot of little open shows and do a lot of patterns and be clean. Now, if you have resistance in those areas, it changes. Now, as you get better, your goal might be able to do all those maneuvers with more collection. But what does everybody do? We see that finished product. So we immediately go for collection before we have function. And function before form. Always. Function before form. And so many people try to teach the form before the function. And I think that's across the board in life.
It's like I always had this one, and I don't know where I picked it up, but our goal in a game was to try to make more free throws than our opponent attempts. And you'd be amazed at how many games you'll look at the statistics after the game.
Yeah.
And you're like, that was it. That was the difference. But then you talk to people and you're like, how'd your kid play? Well, he played hard. He had 4 fouls.
Yeah.
Well, that's lack of discipline.
Yeah.
You know, if your kid goes out there and plays hard and fouls a lot, I mean, they're not disciplined and they're giving free points to the other team. And my lesson kids, it's the same way. I mean, they're just so undisciplined defensively. I'm like, you know, let's try not to do too much. I said, you know, the goal is to play as hard as you can without fouling. Not play as hard as you can and you're going to foul them a lot.
Yeah.
You know? So, I mean, and I think there's some comparisons for sure there.
Definitely. You know, it's just like the majority of my clients, you know, we're going to small shows and stuff. It's to score a 0 on each maneuver. Mm-hmm. And if you can look at that scorecard and you're scoring zeros across the board, I can tell you that most of the smaller shows, especially when I judge and my wife judges, that we can look across the board and you're I don't even need to know you've probably won that class.
Yeah.
If you scored a 0.
Yeah. It's just the boring stuff.
Oh, it's boring.
It's like that, oh gosh, that Western where these guys are riding up to the hitching rail and the one guy goes, watch this. And he rides his horse up to the hitching rail and stops it real hard and gets off. And he goes, can you do that? And he just walks his horse up there and he gets off and he goes, you got off your horse, I got off my horse. We did the same thing. Yeah. It is what it is.
It is. It sure is. Well, we got to talk a little bit about coaching.
We did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another sit down here. It looks like it's getting ready to storm here. I think we beat the rain. I was wondering if it was going to be thundering and lightning when we were trying to record this.
Yeah, it was sprinkling a little bit earlier.
Hopefully before long we can have the studio done at the house. We can get over there and you might even get to look at us. We might even have a camera set up. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Have to dress better.
Yeah. We're dressed up pretty slick right now.